Welcome back. So let's get into our discussion for the evening. A Newzroom high school pupil in the Western Cape is in hot water. This is after a viral video on social media where she can be seen and heard using the K word. The incident has sparked another debate about racism in South Africa. And this is, of course, following backlash against Sports Minister and Patriotic Alliance leader Gayton Mckenzie's alleged racist posts on X. So we're asking, how do you think the issue of racism should be dealt with in South Africa, particularly where it deals with the youngest members of our society, our children and our youth in our schools? Join the conversation by sending us a WhatsApp on 072-110-5584 or give us a call on 010-594-6010. We're joined by diversity experts Asanda Nwasheng as well as Teresa Oakley-Smith. We're also joined by the Institute of Race Relations Legal Division Executive Director Gabrielle Kraus and the National Coloured Congress's founder, Mr. Fadil Adams, also part of the discussion. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. This is really just one of the tougher conversations that we unfortunately continuously have in the country. And I think it gets even more difficult when we start seeing it also impacting children. But I just want to start off with just your initial views upon seeing the video. Gabrielle, I will let you go first. There's this teenage girl, this is assembly, a few learners, black learners are cheering in front of her and she says the K word. I don't know if you saw the video, but what you make and what you assessed of what we saw in that video.
Yeah, it's bad behavior, it's reprehensible behavior. I think the initial feelings that I had were, it's shameful. And I kind of thought that part of what was interesting is I was trying to figure out what's the context. And in looking it up, I saw that the school has a big brag day where teams within the school are celebrated by students. And that is part of what was going on, is the students get together and they chant songs, they sing songs to celebrate one another's excellence. And in looking up the Newzroom High School's track record, I saw they've got a lot of excellence to celebrate. Academically, a 99% pass rate, the best sort of performance of a government school in their district. In terms of sports, a lot of accolades in terms of culture. And in terms of, the racial diversity exhibited in all of that excellence, a lot to be proud of in South Africa, a real rainbow assortment of good news. And so within that, to see this bad behavior is obviously disappointing. But I thought that the headmaster's response and a lot of the responses that we've seen since are again positive signs, sort of showing that it's not being blown out of proportion. It's also not being swept under the rug. I think walking that line between those two extremes and saying instead, look, something's gone wrong here. Let's try and get those kids back on the right path, make it clear that kind of behavior is not acceptable, and go forward and also understand more deeply what's going on here. I think it's a good response to a bad moment.
Fadil, I'll let you go next. And we thought let's bring in the National Coloured Congress because certainly over the past few weeks, as we've been discussing race relations, it hasn't just been a white and black issue. There's been, the cross-cultural debates around the coloured community in the country, and it goes back and forth, and it is such a difficult discussion. But just as the National Coloured Congress, how you interpret what we saw in that video?
The only thing we find shocking about all of this is that the nation appears to be shocked. Racism in South Africa is as rife as it was before '94. I saw that video, and I'll give you the same response that I will to those stupid podcasters. This is a child. This is the sum of society. Let's save this child. Let's educate this child. Let's make this child better. This is someone's mother. This is someone's future mother, someone's future wife. This will be the first church a child attends, the first school a child attends. We can't have that attitude permeating. But then I also want to say, we're not going to clear anything up until we start dealing with this thing. Let me tell you something that might shock some of you. In Cape Town, the K word is prevalent on the Cape Flats. In Cape Town, the word Malawi someone of uncertain origin, is prevalent in the townships. Why are we hiding this? Why are we not addressing this? What kind of leadership are we showing? That is a child. That is something we can fix. It's the adults that is my concern. And I tell you this, I think this thing has been overblown. Not to step on anybody's toes right here, but I think that is a child that can be fixed within 2 weeks with the right guidance, with the right talk, with the right motivation. Problem solved.
Asanda, I want to hear your thoughts on it. Fadil says, save the child. This is going to be someone's future mother. Did you, when you watched that video, see a young girl with ill intent in that moment?
Well, I mean, I think, I'll say what I always say, which is that children are products of society, as has already been said. And what this child is displaying is the attitudes that would be prevailing in their community or in their society. And they would have heard the K word before used against Black people. It wouldn't be the first time. And I agree that this is an opportunity to educate, and this is an opportunity to engage and to help them to understand the history of South Africa and why that particular word is actually harmful and actually continues to hurt people. And I think that, this incident, like many before, it is a reminder that for as long as we refuse to deal with racism in South Africa as adults, for as long as people like me, when we do work in schools to try and teach children about diversity, get attacked, for as long as we refuse to do the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion, of helping young children to unlearn, of putting and ensuring that our schools have social justice and diversity curriculums, we are going to continue to have these conversations and be on these panels in perpetuity. It is only when this work is done and is part of the curriculum and is part of everyday conversations that we are going to begin to deal with the hurt of the past, and we're going to begin to end this war and deal with this wound, because this is a deep-seated wound. It's not the first time someone's being called the K word, and it has a deep history and a painful history.
Fadil says, Terry, and I'm coming to you now. Fadil says, in Cape Town, the K word is prevalent. And then he uses another word that is, prevalent. And this is something that I know that in your work as a diversity specialist you've talked about a lot, is we need to confront just how prevalent our discriminatory beliefs actually are in our homes and in our communities. I mean, do you want to speak to that? That what we see in that video is a child who I suppose is growing up in a certain environment.
Absolutely. And I mean, just hearing from Gabrielle that the headmaster's response referred to it as bad behavior, I mean, just shows you how far we still have to go. I mean, I've been doing this work for 30 years, Naledi, as you know, about 20 years ago. And racism is still extremely prevalent in our society. And I say that as a white person. A white person with my privilege is like many white people that continue to be racist. And racism doesn't just permeate between whites and blacks, as Fadil helped us to understand, and as the incident with the minister last week did. It permeates all aspects of South African, the different cliques of South Africans, the different cultures that are in South Africa. But what makes it special in schools, and where I think we need to do a lot of work in schools, is so one can't address it by simply telling the child, oh, that was bad behavior and you shouldn't use those words. One needs to work deeply with the pupils or the learners. One needs to work with the educators. One needs to work with the parents, administrative and other staff. It needs to be a whole community that's involved if we're ever going to make any progress. It doesn't mean that you in a hall to a room full of people. You have to actually get into the community and talk to all aspects of them. And when I hear the word rainbow, I just think to myself, somebody hasn't been waking up, because there's nothing rainbow about South Africa, I can promise you.
So just how far then do we need to go in being able to get to that ideal unity and diversity that we talk about as a country, right? And especially when it impacts young people, it certainly speaks to how little we have been able to achieve in the 31 years of our democracy. When we come back, we'll ask Gabrielle Kraus, of course, of the Institute for Race Relations, just to give us some of the data. How is it that South Africans actually perceive race relations in the country? And you're more than welcome to send us a WhatsApp as well, 072-110-5584. We're back in a moment. Welcome back. So we continue with our discussion. This is on the back of Newzroom High School having condemned all acts of racism after a video went viral of one of their learners using the K word while watching other students cheering in a session at school, who were asking, what is it that we need to do to deal with racism, not just in our country, but particularly where our children are concerned? Bethuel is on the line in Vanderbijl Park. Thank you so much for calling, Bethuel. Good evening.
Good evening, ma'am, and your viewers as well as the guests.
Sure, go ahead, talk to us.
Yeah, you see, I agree with some of your guests that this is a reflection of our society and the reality of our society, that racism, it is entrenched in the fabric of our society. And many people tried to downplay, to say there's no racism, we are still in the past and so forth. It's a reality that we must accept as a society. But the most important thing that I must say is that we must teach our children that everything that they do, there are consequences. I hear one of gentlemen was saying this is a child, future wife, and a mother, and so forth. But we must teach our children the consequence. There are consequences for their actions. As much as we acknowledge the Children's Act that protects the rights of children, it's the same way if children, they have rights, there are responsibilities. You have a right to eat, my child, but you have a responsibility to clean after yourself. So that is my contribution, that there has to be accountability that will be aligned, and be mindful that we are dealing with a child here.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Okay, Bethuel is in Vanderbijl Park. Let's hear from Mpa in Pretoria. Mpa, good evening.
How are you?
I'm well, sir. Thank you so much for calling. Talk to us.
You know, racism in South Africa has come to a point where it will never go away. Racism is caused by poverty, which is caused by lack of owning property for black people. You hear parties like DA, they will say 30% into democracy, they are still fighting the BEE because few people mess up.
Let me ask you this, Mpa, and I hear, and I'm going to let you finish your point, but it's interesting. But can we say that in the context of children, children that are in the same school and interact on a daily basis?
I get your point, yes. And the issue that, there are some parties in South Africa who are still fighting tooth and nails. And when we hear them talking, they say, black people don't want land. That's what they said. They want to work. So in their context, black people must always be put in a position where they will always work for the white person. That's what they say. And until such time that we get at least the ownership of the properties in South Africa, racism will never go away, because racism comes from arrogance. Those who think they own everything, including land, they are so arrogant that they know they can do anything. Because why? The party that was supposed to liberate the people, which is ANC, fumbled.
All right, Mpa, I'm going to leave you there. Thank you so much for calling in. Sure, interesting perspectives, because, 31 years into our democracy, one would think that that wouldn't be the case in the view, particularly where children are concerned. But let's see some of the WhatsApps that have come in from our viewers. Osireo from Kokomeng says the only way to end racism and the use of the K word in South Africa is to enforce jail time, as most of the users of this word use it knowing very well that they'll pay. Piri in Alex says, until such time that we've eliminated poverty, unemployment and inequality, shall we ever shall we never get rid of racial discrimination? In fact, as people racially discriminate against others because they view them as poor and lower class people, government has to be deliberate in eradicating inequality. That argument again. Piri, thank you so much for that. Victor says racism actually has a place in South Africa. It is in the state laws that more than 140 race-based laws to the state itself is racist. Finish and cloud. Okay. Victor, thank you so much for that. Gabriel, help us with some of the data that the Institute of Race Relations is gathering. If I were to describe the data that you have that says, are South Africans still viewing themselves according to the, pre-democracy hierarchical system of apartheid? So how does the Institute of Race Relations study how South Africans interact across race relations? What have you found?
Thank you. Yeah, so I mean, it is very important, we think, to try and avoid the mistake that a lot of professionals make, who make money every time there's a racist incident. They say, you see, this proves racism is everywhere all of the time. It's the worst thing. We should stop the schools. Like Brackenfell, there was a racist allegation. And there's some same politician, professional figures said, stop the kids from going to school, protest. And then it turns out there's no racism at all. It's investigated, the same at Pretoria High. So we try and say, like this incident clearly seems racist, and that's bad. But how much does it represent how many people think? One of the ways to try and get a sense, like what's the true balance? How are things changing year by year, decade by decade? Is to commission independent companies to do polling of random people to ask them for their views. And one of the questions that we ask is, do you think race relations have improved? So, on this debate, we've heard, I think Asanda said, we haven't begun to address the sins of the past until her particular interventions happened. We haven't even begun to do it. And I think another guest said, racism is as prevalent as it was before 1994. But if you ask most people, they actually give a very different response. So some people give that response, but most people say race relations have improved. And if you ask people, have you personally experienced any racism in the last 5 years? Most people say no. Most Black people say no. In fact, the strongest portion of people who say no are Black. And racial minorities are more likely, Indian, colored and white, to report, I don't know if it's true or not, but what they're reporting is that they've been victims of racism. But again, it's a minority. And if we look at how that changes year by year, it seems like South Africa was on a positive trend until around lockdown. And in the last couple of years, there has been a bit of a negative trend, so we worry about that. But it seems very clear that most people think that things are strongly improved. And we also look at one important data point is I think some of your callers mentioned the arrogance allegedly that comes with owning property or whatever. The hierarchy of wealth and income, we track that, and we see that Momentum did a study, 19 trillion rand in South Africa is the net pot of wealth, and the majority of that's owned by Black people, around 11 trillion rand, and then another 2 trillion rand owned by colored people, a little bit by Indian people, and then 6 trillion by white people. So the majority by Black people. And that's a huge change from 1994, when 80% of wealth was owned by white people.
Okay.
And we can keep going through the matrices, but I think that's a really important one since it kind of touches on something that one of your callers said. The base hierarchy in races has dramatically changed. Unfortunately, we think one of the reasons that tensions have been heating up in the last 4 or 5 years is unemployment has gotten even worse since the lockdown. And that hasn't really bounced back properly. And when there's poverty, when there's strife, unfortunately, it makes it easier for people to get addicted to drugs and to get addicted to bad ideas. And racism is a bad idea, and so it kind of percolates in times of trouble. So we do think you need to improve the basic economic conditions as part of the solution to healing racial wounds.
Asanda, let me bring you in here, and this, I suppose, tug of war between whether or not we focus on inequality and racism are really difficult, right? And where where you place the most importance? Gabrielle says for the majority of black people, according to the data that they've experienced no racism in the past 5 years. I don't know what you make of what he says about that. And here's the thing, even if you were an upper middle class black individual, the K word, for instance, surely still has an impact on you regardless what your social status. So do you want to step in there and what you make of the data that says we're getting better as a country, Asanda?
I mean, I think it's quite fascinating that we have a white man telling us that racism isn't what we black people who experience it are saying that it is. I think that, I don't know who these black people that he's talking to are, or his organization are talking to are. The black people that I speak to on a day-to-day basis continue to experience racism. I myself, despite the work that I do, despite all the privileges I may or may not have, still experience racism and have experienced racism in the past 5 years. And so I think that when we want to minimize, when we want to pretend as if things are not as they are, that's where we lose it. For as long as we want to pretend like everything is fine and there isn't racism, we're going to continue to be shocked, to be surprised, to be taken aback when incidents like what has happened at Knysna happen. It is only when we stop lying to ourselves and we start facing the truth that racism continues, that apartheid spatial planning has not been destroyed. And so colored people still live where they lived in apartheid, black people still live where they lived in apartheid, and white people still have the majority of the share of housing in the best parts of South Africa, which are the suburbs, as demarcated to them by apartheid. It is only when we start taking seriously organizations like District 6 and other organizations that do important work of helping young people to understand racism, to understand how it permeates, to understand the past and how even the term colored actually is a product of the apartheid system and was institutionalized by the apartheid system, and begin to understand that there is colored culture and there is colored identity, but there is a genesis, and that genesis continues to poison the ways in which we talk about each other, the ways in which we engage with each other. And I really think that, we must make sure that even when we have these conversations, we do not prioritize the opinions of white men who come to tell us that this thing that we experience isn't really happening at the level and at the monstrosity or the seriousness that it is. And I think that, it's actually quite sad that as an expert of diversity, when I come here, I'm being accused by Gabrielle of saying the things I'm saying because I'm trying to get money off of racism. I think that's sad because my work is about much deeper than that. My work is about re-engaging the social fabric of South Africa. It's about bringing people together. It's about supporting people to have dialogue and to be able to have these difficult conversations. Okay. And I think, I am amazed that we've got a member of the Colored Congress who is saying that there is racism in his community. But we have somebody who isn't even a member of the affected community or even the community that has offended in this particular case, telling us that things are otherwise. We really need to think, even in terms of the kind of panels that we have, who we bring to the panels and whose voices we prioritize, particularly when we talk about racism, because it is actually harmful to do this. But I'm not surprised, again, because you have political parties like the Democratic Alliance who are saying, let's forget about race, let's look at economic issues, let's kill BE, affirmative action, and all of the policies that are put in place for redress, for as long as we allow our government together with the DA and the government of national unity, as long as those kind of conversations are allowed and those kind of provocation of Black people who have suffered in this country are allowed, we are going to continue to keep coming back to this. While we don't
Right.
hate each other, yes, as much as we used to, and we're able to live each other much better than we used to pre-1994, that does not mean racism has ended. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean racism isn't as prevalent as it
Right.
was.
I need to bring in other voices, but I must say this, that part of the reason why we have a panel mix that we do have is for diversity of opinion. And that is what this country is about. It's about diverse perspectives. But Fadil, I'm going to come back to you. There's, you know, again, there's the issue of colored people live in these areas. Black people still live in these areas. And what you think needs to be done with even the relationship between black South Africans and colored South Africans, which is quite a difficult one, and continues to be one that is just, you know, how do we even start to go into a school like Knysna and say, well, many of the challenges of these two races very similar, and that there is more, you know, to hold on to together than there is to pull apart.
You're going to need the wisdom of Solomon to fix that one. I'm not Solomon. What I can tell you is that I think all of us on this panel tonight are chasing the wrong tiger. There's bigger ones than this. That's a child. I've said it before. That's something we can read to. But I remember during lockdown, a full police general speaking to his platoon he was about to deploy because of the restrictions, telling them to go and sort out the bushes. Where was the national outrage? Where was the Human Rights Commission? Where were panels like this? I can speak to you about the ANC and its skewed BEE and Jimmy Manier, the Director General of Labour at the time, who could tell us that there's too many colours in the Western Cape. You guys need to go. You need to disperse. That was racism. Where was the Human Rights Commission? Where was this panel? I can tell you about Alan Ziller and Marius Koen questioning coloured people's skills. I can tell you about the DA talking to us about meritocracy, but then court findings are made that find that they employ white matriculants over coloureds with diplomas and degrees.
Yeah.
I think we're chasing something that can be hugged, that can be embraced, that can be fixed.
Okay.
We're not looking at the bigger issues. And let me you gave us 5 minutes. Let me please allow me.
Yeah, I've got to take an ad break, but I'll let you finish. Go ahead. I'll give you 1 more minute, and then when we come back from the ad break, I'll give you more time. Go ahead.
Apartheid spatial planning must be addressed. It must be addressed. How can we still have colored areas, black areas, white areas, 31 years after democracy? It's been a total waste of time. Let's face it, the only times when we socialize is at work. That's it. My kid, my daughter, had a best friend at primary school, Aya Bulela. They were besties. They loved each other. They moved on to high school and they moved on. They've never seen each other since. This is the problem right here. We're never going to have social cohesion like this. You can have your ad break now. I'll wait for you. Thank you.
And thank you for the ad break. Okay, we're going to take a short break. Terry's also got some thoughts to share with us. And what we'll do is, when we come back, we'll hear from the expert, as well as, we know that we've heard from Asanda, but another expert, Terry Oakley-Smith, will talk to us about what it is that we need to do from now onwards, particularly in our schools. Stay with us. Welcome back, and we continue the discussion around race relations. This is after an incident coming out of Knysna High School that saw a video going viral of a teenage girl using the K word referring to black learners in a session at their school. This is as we explore race relations between colored South Africans, black South Africans, white South Africans, and of course we can go on. But what is it that we need to do 31 years into our democracy? Tsepo's calling in Pretoria. Tsepo, good evening.
Yeah, how are you, Sister Lady?
I'm well, sir. Thank you so much for calling.
Yes, Sister Lady. For us to end the racism, Sister Lady, with this politician organization, as a forum, the EFF, they are the problem. They are dividing the nations. We cannot allow the EFF to kill the poor. We have young African children in South Africa, young African who know nothing about the apartheid. Whenever they hear someone singing, kill the poor, kill the farmer, what comes to their mind? What tells them? So are we going to unite? Are we going to get peace in this land? And here is the AfriForum promoting racism for me, going to America and telling the American about South Africa for whatever, genocide, and there's no genocide. Here is the ANC, whenever the ANC campaign, they don't speak about the future, they don't speak about building this nation, they speak about apartheid. The ANC must stop speaking talking about the apartheid, telling people about the apartheid is thing of the past. We must stop talking about apartheid. Talk about the future. We have drugs, problem with drugs, illegal foreigners. We have so many issues in South Africa.
Okay. Yeah, Tsepo, this is one of those things that you know that it's going to be a very difficult thing to tackle in the national dialogue, for instance. Takato, you'll be our last caller in Lydenburg. Takato, good evening.
Good evening, it's Naledi. Thank you very much.
It is Naledi, sir. Thank you for calling. Talk to us.
You know, in order to deal with racism in South Africa, I think we must move away from this faith of or belief of revolution. We need to understand that apartheid by itself is a form of religion. And those who follow that religion of racism, not apartheid, racism, are those who believe in their racist superiority. So any intruder is seen as these K-words and baboons and all that in their space of exclusivity. Secondly, they are also economically empowered and to propagate this thing. Hence, you see here and there sporadically you will find these children having these things at schools, in the beaches, and more so within the corridors of workplaces. Many black people are mistreated because they are simply black people. Lastly, Nalet, the 1994 resolution or solution, we must understand it dealt with the leaves. You know, if racism is a tree, 1994 dealt with the leaves.
Yeah.
Hence, we are having this debate today.
Yeah, we didn't go deep
and
enough.
Also,
Yeah.
I'm hoping that the national dialogue will be talking to this issue of racism.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it will have to talk to the Constitution, because as things are, our laws in South Africa, they look at racism and the black hate for whiteness, not white people, whiteness of privilege and economic power and all, the same way. So they cover the same blanket.
I need to cut you off because I'm out of time, but thank you so much for that. Terry, just your final thoughts here. Give us, the bow at the end of this very difficult box. What is the recommendation on what we do? The national dialogue, are we optimistic that even is going to work 31 years into our democracy, that bringing everybody into a room is going to be easy when we struggled just through the past 45 minutes, for instance?
No, I mean, I must say that I don't have a lot of faith in the national dialogue at all, but I do think there needs to be dialogue. And I think just to end up, my final thoughts would be on this actual issue of the racism in this school and the K word that was used by this pupil and what the school should do. Because I've worked in many schools and universities and businesses, yes, sometimes for money, Gabrielle, not always. I think the first thing we need to look at is, does the school have a policy around racism? And you'll probably find it doesn't. As Asanda mentioned, what the curriculum, how does that address racism? Because what we should be looking at is not building non-racism, to be addressing anti-racism. We need to make people aware of the difficulties, the pain. We can see from our own panel, from hearing from Asanda and also from Fadil, the immense pain that racism causes people. So our schools need to be addressing it. They need to have it for educators in the curriculum go through when they're learning to be teachers. They need to have it in the classrooms built into the curricula for parent bodies, and the school should be calling the parent body together after this incident and to talk about it, and to talk about what the consequences will be for a child who. There can't be. We're a country of no consequences. I mean, I really think.
Yeah. Guys, I'm going to leave it there. Terry, thank you so much for those recommendations, a reminder of the work that needs to be done in our schools. And I know that very much the work that Asanda and Terry continue to do. So thank you so much for doing that. And thanks to our guests as well. Fadil Adams of the National Coloured Congress, Gabrielle Kraus of the Institute for Race Relations, and Asanda Mwasheng and Teresa Oakley-Smith, diversity experts. Keep the conversation going. on X at Newzroom405. And once again, our guests will continue the conversation going with those very emboldened views that they do have. We'll take a short break. We've got your headlines at the top of the hour. Stay with us.